Deputy Clare Daly. I understand that you're sharing, is that correct?
Yeah, with Deputy Boyd Barrett.
Is that agreed?
Yeah,
okay.
Thanks,
10 minutes, thank you.
I think, bringing in a standalone provision on children's rights, affirming the individual right of the child, is a very positive measure. I think aspiring to a firmer protection for children under the Constitution is a very good thing, and I wouldn't in any way underestimate its impact. I think it is a significant piece of work, and I very broadly welcome it in that parameter. I think it is somewhat ironic that we've had 5 referenda around the issue of the rights of the so-called unborn, when the rights of born children have been systematically ignored in this state. And I would take issue actually with the Minister for Finance, who says we've a good record in this regard. Now, nobody is at fault personally, but we have an appalling record in relation to children's rights. Well, historically, obviously with the industrial schools and the Magdalen laundries, but recently as well in the children who've died in state care and so on. So I do think we've ground to catch up, and I really welcome this in the context that it does, at the very least, give us an opportunity to discuss some of these issues and put centre stage how do you defend children's rights, and what are those rights in the first place. Now, I do think that the provision and the constitutional amendment is aspirational, and that's a good thing. As a socialist, I would generally be aspirational, but I suppose the disconnect here is between the big gap between establishing in theory the rights of children and then the reality on the ground, particularly a reality against a backdrop of how do you achieve what the government said is its objective of protecting and vindicating the rights of children against a backdrop of increased economic austerity. And that really is the challenge. You would think that it would be agreed amongst all of us that basic rights like the right to food and healthcare and education and so on would be guaranteed to all children and all citizens. But even during the boom, that wasn't the case. We had traveller children being left behind, asylum seeker children and so on. And now in the new economic climate, with increased costs on families and a decrease in the family budget, it's quite clear that meeting the basic needs of children is becoming problematic for tens of thousands of families. The CSO said an average family needs €810 a week to adequately provide for its needs. Clearly, most families in the state are well short of that. The idea of a secure home, a happy family home, is being threatened by mortgage arrears, by the way in which the government is implementing changes in rent allowance, almost 100,000 people in receipt of rent allowance, many of them being forced to move out of the areas where they've lived in because of the government cutbacks. Their children, some of whom the parents campaign for to get into special schools in the area, have to uproot and leave, not to mind all the cuts to family income support and all the rest of it. And it's unquestionable that this economic austerity is giving rise to serious mental health problems, depression and so on, linked to financial anxiety in many homes around the country. Aware reported a 29% increase in calls to its hotline, and they linked that increase directly to the debt burden. And it is a constant struggle for a lot of parents to maintain a happy home, and obviously those who face decades of debt or the potential of eviction have a serious problem in trying to provide security for their children. And unless we address these issues, well then it really is very much a lopsided debate. I think that's particularly apparent when we look at the issue of education, because the irony is that actually one of the few child-centred clauses in our Constitution is the right to free primary education. But the dogs on the streets know that it isn't free, and a lot of children aren't accessing it properly because of economic austerity. We have the rising costs of education, school books, extra pressure and so on. We don't really have time to develop the points now, but it is ironic in some ways that that right is in the Constitution, but in reality it isn't really there. We see that similarly with the clauses where any school which gets public money shouldn't have a religious ethos or expose children to indoctrination, but still children don't have a right to be excluded from religious instruction as a normal part of the day. I think obviously this week, sadly, the issue of bullying in the schools has been centre stage, and the rights of children in that environment, again, needs to be addressed. There's been huge bodies of work done on this, but unless we address these things, well then really, you know, the idea of protecting children's rights in an increasingly unequal society is very much lip service unless these basic issues are addressed. And maybe that's why RTE and the media aren't picking up on it as much. Maybe people feel that it's maybe, while it's important, and I'm not in any way underestimating that it is a step forward, how much really is it going to mean? Now, a lot has been made on how this is going to impact on vulnerable children. And the objective, obviously, is to place the protection of children at the centre of decision-making. And that is a really good thing. There's a lot of talk about early intervention, and you know, that would be welcome. But here we have the sort of gap between reality and aspiration again, because early intervention means more social workers, more guards, and more welfare provisions to help those who are struggling. And you see, we can dress it up any way we like in terms of rationalisation and, you know, improved working methods. The reality is that early intervention means more staff hours, a skillful approach by well-trained people. I mean, inexperienced people and overworked people make mistakes and can cause damage by their intervention. But the reality is that we've had budget cuts leading to increased class sizes. How can teachers keep an eye out for vulnerable children when we've the second highest class size in Europe? And Minister Quinn warning us last week that class sizes are going to get even bigger. A shortage of 3,000 teachers needed over the next few years, cutbacks in SNAs. How can we detect the signs and intervene if you're a teacher in that regard? Similarly, the Gardaí, who are already stretched, I think it's about 40 rural Garda stations closed. How can they keep a watching brief when their budget last year was cut by 8%? And of course, crucially, at the crux of this is the issue of social workers. And I don't think this is an area that needs a huge intervention. At the moment, my understanding is that, you know, about 30 social workers qualify from the HSE Trinity degree programme, which is the only one where you can directly go and join the HSE panel. But that last year, the HSE panel was suspended and people didn't get an opportunity to go on that. So the quotas aren't being filled. The public sector recruitment embargo means that social workers are more and more stretched. They're doing a lot more work by email, a lot less direct contact. So how can we protect children against that backdrop? It is a contradiction which I don't think the government has answered. I think the last 2 points really that need to be highlighted are, it is a concern for people that the increased economic desperation, deprivation, the inability of some parents to cope could result in them having their children taken from them, where better and enhanced support would lead to a happier resolution within their own natural family. And this is, I'm assured by people I've raised this with, that the wording of being proportionate is sufficient to guard against that. I'm sure we would all hope that that would be the case, but it is something we need to be mindful for. There is a lot of talk about increasing adoption rights, giving children the opportunity of a second chance in a loving home, and that's obviously something that we would all be in favour of, but we have to be extremely careful in that regard. The history of adoption in Ireland is not good. There are tens of thousands of undocumented adoptees who have been, if you like, robbed of their identity because of the way in which this state has handled adoption in the past. And I do know that many of those people are concerned that the associated adoption legislation going with this referendum doesn't deal with their issues. It's very much dealing with the vulnerable category of children in care now and then being adopted in the future, which is fine. But the urgency to have a system of protecting the documents there for tracing and protecting those files, they still need to be addressed, because the most basic right really a person has is to their own identity. And I think we really need to put that centre stage. I do think the idea of, you know, a child who's living in foster care for more than 3 years and living with a particular family for 18 months, the possibility of that person being adopted is potentially a good thing. I do welcome that. I think within that confines, the children's view and the child's view is central, to that, and I'm very glad to see that respected and put centre stage. So I think, you know, it is good. Very few people are going to oppose this referendum, and I think the really good thing about it is that it allows us the opportunity to discuss some of the complexities around these issues and to put the spotlight on it. But we need to do a lot more to really vindicate those rights. It does mean a complete standing on head of a lot of government policy in other areas, particularly the economic ones, and they are the ones that we'll be calling on when it gets to the budget and all of that, is really to put your money where the aspirations are. Otherwise we will be failing children in this state yet again.